Circle of Hope Network, doing life and being church together.
All right. I'm going to make it as big as I can. Right there. All right. Ministry report number 1. I just gave it that. Name of the chaplain is Ivan Omaña. Date of the visit 10/26/15. Time of the visit 09:15 a.m. Location of the visit Hospital Garden. Patient pseudonym is PRD and JZ. And faith background is Santeria. Do you know what that is? Santeria. You will know about that in a minute. It's an Afro-American, Afro-Caribbean religion that is a mixture of spiritualism, witchcraft, Catholicism, and a bunch of other things. It is Monday morning. After a 24-hour shift, I am looking forward to going home and catching up on some Z's. But before that, I have to complete my weekly meetings with the hospital CEO. So my shift is becoming a 26-hour shift. After the meeting, I am walking back to the hospital to pick up my things from the office. As I walk into the building, I hear faint sob to my right. As I look over, I see a woman in her late 50s sitting on the bench in a fetal position, looking towards the flower garden. I am tired, and I can simply go to the office and get the incoming chaplain to follow up with her. But something pulls me over to her. So I change directions and I approach her. So who's going to be the chaplain? All right, you be the chaplain. Who will be P, which is the patient in this case? Who will be P? Dave, please. Okay. And I'm going to be reading the parentheticals. And there are some parentheticals that has PAS 1, etc. Those are places where I demonstrate competency. Remember, this is a competency verbatim. So I'm going to ignore those quotes for competency, but I'm going to do the other ones. Okay, chaplain, go ahead.
Hello, is everything okay?
Hello, chaplain.
Wipes the tears with the back of her hand.
Yes, everything's okay.
Well, those tears that you just wiped tell me otherwise. Do you mind if I sit with you?
No, please, sit with me.
Moves to her right to leave a space for me on her left.
You've been here for a while, haven't you? I think you're wearing the same clothes you had last night when you took me over to the cafeteria.
That's very observant of yours. As a matter of fact, I'm about to finish a long shift.
Long sigh. We stay quiet for a few seconds. I want to give her some space to go back to the initial question. Quietly, she begins to cry again and also wipes the new tears. We don't have tissue, and I don't have my suit on. I always have either tissue or a handkerchief on me.
So, if those tears you keep wiping the top, what would they say?
Looks at me as if sizing me up.
That I'm sad.
That's a good one. I can see that you're sad. That's why I sat here.
I'm just an overprotecting mother, frustrated because I can't do much.
I purposely stay quiet to allow her space for elaboration.
I want to help my son. Hell, a lot of people want to help him, but he doesn't want our help.
You sound frustrated, even somewhat angry. Can you tell me more?
She looks at me again. I'm starting to feel like she has a problem trusting.
As you know, I came to visit my son who was admitted because he was having seizures.
She's making reference to our initial contact when I escorted her to the cafeteria the night before.
His girlfriend called me because he'd been having them for 3 days and he was refusing to come to the hospital. So I called 911 from Puerto Rico and had them get him at his apartment and bring him to the hospital. Then I hopped on the next plane, and that's how I ended up here.
I stayed quiet. There seems to be more into this story.
My son and I have been sort of at odds in the last year or so. He came to Florida because he wanted to come to school here, but he's done nothing about that. This is now his third girlfriend in a year.
Pauses and looks at my face as if trying to read my reactions. I just look back at her face, waiting for more.
And on top of that, I find he's using. How can he be so stupid?
So the source of your anger is because he is using.
I want to say what I hear, but I hold myself. Perhaps she will experience me judgmental. After all, the way she has looked at me during the conversation leads me to think that she is still not sure if she can trust me. So I leave my statement there, allowing her space to elaborate.
Yes, he's using pot, and he knows how that affects me.
Let me stop here and ask, do you know what we're talking about here?
Plus,
Pot?
Marijuana.
Marijuana? All right. Chaplain, go ahead.
how does that affect you?
Well, besides knowing how this affects his own health, he must also know how it looks for the son of a federal judge to be using illegal substances.
She looks directly at my eyes. I take a second to breathe deeply and sustain her look.
So, his drug use affects you both as a mother and as a judge.
To top it all off, he's acting like a child now. The doctor told him that his seizures are a direct result of using drugs and he has to give it up immediately. So he got mad at the doctor and threw him out of the room. Then, because I tried to take the doctor's side, he threw me out of the room. That's why I'm here, trying to find a way to plead and get him to accept what the doctor is saying.
So, how are you doing that? Have you found an answer?
Nope. And the more I think,
Begins to cry again.
the more I think, the angrier and sadder I get.
I can see that. So, what were you trying to do?
Well, I've been trying to pray and talk to God and the saints, but I can't seem to get anywhere. It's as if everyone up there is busy taking care of other things now that I need them the most.
She was opening a door for spiritual conversation. At least that's what I felt. My problem is that I took it to religious conversation rather than spiritual. Based on her comment, I made an assumption, thus breaking a rule of chaplaincy.
So, you've been praying to God and the saints and have had no answer. Do you want me to call someone from the church? The local priest is a good friend. I can call him if you want me to.
Whatever gave you the impression that I'm a Catholic?
I apologize. It was a mistake of me to assume that you were. I threw myself at the mercy of the court.
I was honestly trying to make up for my mistake, and that was a joke on my part. I throw myself at the mercy of the court because she's a judge.
Yes, yes.
Go ahead, putting her hand on my shoulder.
It's okay, chaplain. I'm just different in the way I believe.
Now, you piqued my curiosity. What do you mean different?
Still with her hand on my shoulder with a mischievous look.
I am Baba Lu. I practice Santeria.
Now she looks straight into my eyes, trying to read a reaction.
I don't know much about Santeria. I've heard about Babalu. It is becoming quite popular in my country. I'm from Venezuela.
Her expression changed.
Oh, yes. The holy mountain of Sorte Maria
Leonza.
Leonza, that's what I was going to say. Jose Gregorio and Higuero
Negro Primero.
Negro Primero.
I know exactly who and what she's talking about. When I was a pastor in Venezuela, I supported a couple of churches in the area where Sorte is located. But besides that, I really don't know anything else about Santeria.
What's Babalu?
Babalu is the way they refer themselves. Like I refer myself as an Adventist. So Santeria believers, they refer them to themselves as Babalaos.
Babalaos. Okay.
She senses my lack of knowledge and begins to explain that in general, Santeria is an Afro-Caribbean religion that mixes aspects of worship to the saints, but those saints include more than those declared saint by the church. She also explained that there were ingredients of spiritualistic practices, like sacrifice of animals and voodoo. In the conversation, I made a special effort to stay with her and not let my imagination wander about the things she was describing. I had heard things that would cause anyone to be scared, but at this time I was more concerned with connecting with this grieving mother than with old stories of fear. After she explained her beliefs, I took a deep breath.
It sounds like this is very important to you. It is an important part of your life. The few people I have met who are Santeros seems to be very committed and serious about what they believe.
Indeed, this is important to me and my son. He is also Babalu.
I let the statement linger for a few seconds.
So I wonder how can a frustrated mother and her angry son use their common belief to restore their bruised relationship. Even more, how can a Santera mother who loves her son so very much get the attention of the God who lives in the saints she prays to?
Read that again. How can
a Santera
mother
who loves her son
so
very much get the attention of the God she believes in and the saints she prays to?
That is key. That's why I made you read it again. How can a mother get the attention of the God she believes in and the saints she prays to? She looks to me and her eyes communicate awe. I don't know where her awe comes from, and my usual tendency would be to unpack that. But in this case, I want to let her ponder my question. So I bite my tongue and stay quiet and in the moment.
You're certainly a different kind of preacher.
What do you mean, Your Honor?
Will, counselor,
She keeps with the joke.
most preachers would have tried to convince me that what I believe is wrong. But you're actually encouraging me to use it.
Well, I don't know. Perhaps I'm wrong, but if I claim to believe something, it must be because I get something out of it. So I guess I'm inviting you to use it.
Mm.
I mean, you have used it in the past. I'm guessing it has worked because you believe it in it.
You're right. It has worked in the past. I don't think there has been a time when my son and I were closer than when we practiced Babalu together.
Sounds like an interesting door to explore. Is there a way I can facilitate?
Chaplain, you've been very helpful. I think I know what I need to do.
She looked at me and stopped for a while.
Don't worry, we won't do an animal sacrifice inside the hospital.
Wow. Where did that come from?
I'm just messing with you.
Winks at me.
People talk about those all the time, but we only do those in the holy mountains. I will, however, need an egg, but I can run out to the supermarket and buy it.
Well, I'm glad you have a plan. I'm not going to be here today. I'm going to go get some rest, but if you don't mind, I will notify the duty chaplain that you will be needing their assistance later. Is that okay?
That'd be fine. I don't foresee needing their help, but if I do, I'd rather call on you tomorrow.
Well, I'd be honored to help if you need me.
We left things there. I found out later that she was able to perform the rituals that she referred to, and the staff facilitated some time for her and her son to experience some healing in their relationship. I'm not aware that they acted in any way that was disrupted, but my understanding is that the relationship between mother and son was somewhat restored. And the healing process seems to have started after that, after they joined together in their spiritual quest. Questions? Comments?
Powerful.
What? What about is powerful, my friend?
be able to facilitate, even though it's a kind of a, things that is not something, but there is some imagination of the old story that can be very affecting in the emotion of the.
So if I am hearing you correctly, one of the things that made it powerful was that I was not afraid to recognize I didn't know much about it.
Yeah.
I think the thing that amazed me the most was the part where you said you tried not to let your imagination run away with what she was telling you, because at that point you already had a preconceived idea and you wanted to stay focused on what she was telling you rather than the preconceived idea of what you knew she was about.
And do you care to guess why I wrote it there? Because I could have avoided writing it.
You can make it up.
Because it showed that you stayed focused on her. You kept on track and trying to find out her problem
Because,
you needed to hear what she had to say.
perfect. But I want to make sure that you understand something interesting. That lesson here is that it took intentionality on my part.
Yes, it would be so, and that's why I brought that up, because
Yes.
in my mind, I would be so tempted, like you said, to just go off and start thinking and even get sidetracked from the whole conversation.
Mm-hmm. And we tend to do that. We get sidetracked from the conversation because we start thinking about all the things that we have in the back of our minds about what that means, who they are, what they do. I mean, I remember when I was writing this and now that I'm sharing with you, I remember times when I was with my youth having weekend campouts. And we would go to the river, down the river from where we were camping, and you would find a bunch of bones. And it turns out that the week while we were sleeping the night on a Friday night onto Sabbath morning, there were people doing sacrifices down from us.
And that's the temptation that become a chaplain-centered instead of a patient-centered.
Exactly. So when you see that, you start dealing with your own problem, and then you forget the most important person that's there.
Mm-hmm.
Did I talk to you about that library, imaginary library?
A little bit yesterday.
I said a little bit about that. You do have experiences. You do have things that form who you are and what you have done. Those experiences and those things that form who you are and what you have done come up at times in the conversation. And in this case, and this is very specific, thank you, Dave, for bringing it up, because in this case, the library was pushing back, the books were pushing to get into the conversation, but I made a conscious decision. No, you're going to stay behind me. I'm going to keep you here, and if I need you, I'm going to pull you out. But right now, the most important thing is this woman that's in front of me. That's the most important thing.
How do you call that agenda? Yeah.
Yeah, I call it agenda, yeah.
How do you call that as agenda?
I think it's an agenda. I don't have a different name.
Agenda of curiosity of exploration?
No, I think my appreciative curiosity helps me to put the agenda behind. My appreciative curiosity helps me to put the agenda behind and stay with the person that's in front of me, because my agenda is my patient. My agenda is not my own needs. My agenda is my person, the person that's in front of me, regardless of how different they believe from me. Yes?
The brief context and then the quote I came across last year at a workshop, or actually I found it as I learned some other quotes, but I was showing Alan in the car this morning. Last fall, from a family member of a resident 21 years ago, that I conducted her mom's funeral. Then 3 months later, her husband's funeral, she called me and asked me, can you conduct my husband's funeral? The following year, she called me and asked me, can you conduct my aunt's funeral? So that was the context setting 21 years ago. So last fall, I got an email from the lady's son. The lady is now 91 years old with a terminal illness. And the son said, my mom has requested to have, in Canada the term is medical assistance in dying. So I went and saw her at the hospital, and I told her, whatever your wish is, if you want me present in this room or across the hall or elsewhere, I will honor your wish. She said, I would like you here. And some of her family, children, were having the range of issues of support, understanding and supporting, and not understanding and not agreeing at all with her. What I saw you experiencing there, Patrick Vesperian worked in Paris with those who were dying, and he says to accompany someone is not to go before them, not to point out the road, or to impose an itinerary, or even to recognize the direction it's going to take. It is to walk by his side, leaving him free to choose his path and the rhythm of his step. And we were talking about who had made the comment about the dance. Your student, was it? That dancing, follow the dance of that person. And you were waiting for the next step of the dance to be taken, for her to allow her to find in her beliefs the direction that she knew she would end up feeling good about taking. And that's what the compassionate presence is all about, really.
And it was just a question on my part. It was just a question. I mean, if it has worked for you, use it. And if it doesn't work, then why you believe it? Why do you believe it? You were sharing with me a story in the beginning. Can you share with everybody?
Yeah, well, I used to have a brother. He moved in with me to my house, and he bought a box of native parmigiano here, and he started putting them on the wall, and I was walked right behind him. I started taking them off, putting them in a box, and I threw them out the door. And he said, "What do you do that for?" Well, I said, "First place, my house." I said, "You could have asked me." I said, "But anyway," I said, "Come here." So let's sit down. So we pulled that box. I said, "If you help me understand what these things mean," I said, "help me understand why you believe in this stuff." So we sat there, he taught me, he helped me understand. I said, "See," I said, "that's all we had to do." So we went back in and we started putting the stuff back up because I was there to understand.
So there was an understanding now. The cultural humility. The cultural humility.
And the other thing I was going to say was, in that thing there, you didn't practice busting eggs with that lady or killing chickens or whatever.
Good.
There's a fine line.
I did not practice that. At no moment I went into that room to do the rituals with them. I wasn't even in the hospital. I did not give away my identity and my theology. Yes, sir.
She's really wanting you to invite you to be there. Will you?
If she would have invited me to be there, I would have said no because I was tired and I needed to go home and sleep.
Theologically.
I would have said no either, also. I would have said no.
You the one who got the chickens.
Yeah. No, I would have said no. If she had invited me to be there for the ceremony, I would have said no. There's a great probability that she would have never invited me because Santeria is also, I learned later on, that it's also very reclusive and seclusive. So they will only take people that believe the same thing they believe.
Well, you didn't say that some of the hospitals still?
They facilitate it.
Okay.
They facilitate it. What is interesting is that I never had any evidence that anyone in the hospital went in the room and performed the rituals with them. The only understanding I have is that I communicated with the staff. I said they have special beliefs and they want to do a special ritual for them, for their needs. It actually took me 1 more hour to get out of the hospital that day because I had to go and I had to meet with the nursing huddle and tell them about this, tell them about the need to facilitate, tell them if you think, I told them, if you think that what they're going to do or what they're doing is disruptive to other patients, please stop it immediately and call the chaplains. Stop it immediately. So the hospital, the staff facilitated it. They kept an eye on that so that it would be non disruptive for anybody else. And so when it wasn't disruptive, they finished that, and then that actually helped them, as you will see in the next part.
You met their needs, but it was in a protected environment.
I met their needs. It was in a protected environment. Yes.
In healthcare, and I had a conversation with you a little bit about this as well. In healthcare, in cases like this, we are evolving with the element of ministry to somebody's spirit versus somebody's religiosity. So I think that element of the case study came out as well, because the comment the patient made to you, you're different from other chaplains I've spoken to.
Mm-hmm.
Because other chaplains may have tried to minister to her religious side and not to her spirit. So I saw that come out clearly as well, because it's an area of healthcare that we're becoming much more focused on, even also in staff education, is to, spiritual care is not necessarily about ministering to somebody's religious thinking and philosophy. It's about ministering to their spirit.
You got it. And you will see this in the analysis. Value of the visit for the patient. We must work on identifying the patient, who is actually not the hospital patient, is not the guy that's in the bed. Who is the identified patient here? The mother of the patient. In this encounter, the ministry is directly provided to the mother of the patient, although it should be recognized that the broken relationship between mother and son is affecting the clinical outcomes of the son. The patient already has too much to deal with, as he is faced with the consequences of his choices. On top of that, he also has to deal with his mother's feeling about those choices, and also her perceptions on how his drug use affects her role as a federal judge. I can only imagine that if PRJ is a good Latina mother, she has used a wide array of guilt-causing interactions. I believe she's so focused on her perception of the drug problem that she has kind of forgotten how to relate with her son. And until the relationship is reopened, there is no opportunity for healing, in my opinion. Cultural observations. In Latino cultures, especially within Caribbean groups, the relationship between mother and their children is very important. Having a Puerto Rican mother myself, I know that Puerto Rican mothers tend to be extremely involved and even at times disrespectful of boundaries. The problems grow with second generations, as children tend to adopt the boundary-driven and individualistic culture in the United States. I know enough to understand that by getting involved, this mother is attempting to show love in a way that is actually causing separation. Thus, my intent is to invite her to explore other ways to demonstrate her care. From her conversation, I gather that the practice of Santeria was a source of unity between this mother and her son. Perhaps this can be the way for them to get on the same page and talk the same language. Family dynamic. In my experience as a chaplain, I have come to understand that at times, the breaks of communication among the members of a family can exacerbate health problems. Thus, one of my goals as I continue with this conversation was to identify ways in which PRJ and JC can communicate and find common ground. it was obvious that assisting them to reconnect with their faith helped some, because shortly after they performed the rituals, JC was discharged from the hospital. In patient rounds the next day, the nursing staff communicated that the rituals were a turning point for JC, and he became more cooperative and invested in his care. Also, JC and PRJ seemed to be more united in the goal of seeking health. Theological reflection. There are many theological topics stemming from this experience. I think of the biblical counsel to parents to not provoking their children to anger. I have wondered many times about this verse, especially now that I see the relationship between my wife and our daughter. My wife, as a Latino mother, tends to disrespect the space our daughter has established. And she also finds it very difficult to understand our daughter's anger reaction. Yet I have also seen her react with anger when her own mother disrespects her space. Could this be one of the things that Paul had in mind when he talks about this? As an emotion that is generally viewed as negative emotion, especially among Latinos, anger can be spiritualized to the point where children can be guilt into doing things the way parents want them to. The biblical counsel seems to be in direct opposition to this idea of guilting our children into doing what we want them to do, even if it is listening to what the doctor is saying. Another theological aspect of this encounter is the concept introduced by Pope John XXIII, who is cited with saying, "A family that prays together stays together." I'm not aware of the complete restoration or of the relationship between PRJ and JC, but at least for the next couple of days, they seem to be united by their faith and their religious practices. Also, this introduces the idea that religious care is at its best also spiritual care. Religious care at its best also spiritual care. If we were to define spiritual care as that which brings and sustains life, then by uniting through their religious experience, both PRJ and JC experience some spiritual healing in the form of restored communication. And let me stop here and acknowledge something. This is the third time I present this verbatim to a group of Seventh-day Adventist pastors, and this is the first time that they do not try to crucify me. Oh, come on, man. Come on. Come on.
How do you feel like
Before I go there, let me finish my idea here. How does that make me feel? Why are we so darn insecure about our own theology? Why are we so insecure? Why do we have to make everybody an Adventist? But chaplain, you didn't preach the gospel to her. It wasn't the moment. Now, you want me to give you a little secret? This happened in October of 2015, right? I went to Puerto Rico for vacation about 2 years later. And guess who I found in the Central and the Rio Piedra Seventh-day Adventist Church?
The mother.
Judge PRZ is now a Seventh-day Adventist.
Kindness.
Now hold on, there was somebody there. There was somebody there before you.
Preach it without words. Thank you very much. It's in the, on the same line, really. We Seventh-day Adventist pastors have a mission in mind. That is to convert the whole world. And sometimes can be counterproductive.
You do know that Ellen White says that to force someone into making a decision at the moment of their most vulnerability, it's a sin of a raised hand, she says.
Yeah.
disconnected because this is a struggle in the church right now, renting a church Sunday keeper. It's a struggle right now, and they walked out last Sabbath, 2 elders and the family.
because I preach Ezekiel 8, worshiping Sunday, and expose exegesis. And now the following day we have pancake, and the Baptist rent was amazed. But how did you do that? How did you feed the people? How did you share the message? And I said, the message alone is the kindness that we give. I learned it from CPA, of course.
Yeah,
they
you're
said-
damaged. You're damaged goods.
You know what happened? There, I'm the target right now.
Yeah, you have a target in your back, and it's okay.
I'm being crucified.
Yes. I saw a hand over here and a hand here.
It's always very difficult to remember as ministers. We don't do the converting.
Amen to that.
Our job.
Amen to that.
We help facilitate it.
Uh-huh.
We don't do it. That's a prime example. That's a very, very difficult thing to always remember. Because I have heard many stories similar to the one you just shared with us, where we sometimes don't realize that we're on a divine appointment, but God's going to work it out.
Over here and then over here.
I was saying that I liked how you said the insecurity. Because there's a certain insecurity that comes with when we meet people. And we think that we have to, it's like you have to like force feed someone the entire gospel message. But maybe you're just giving a piece. My godparents, they actually invited this couple, this mother, single mom and her daughter home like 20 years ago. They didn't know anything about the lady and her daughter. They just invited her home, showed her kindness. Fast forward 20, 25 some years later, the girl marries their son. So it's not like the girl ended up becoming converted to Adventism, but it wasn't by my godparents' hand. Like sometimes you're not providing the entire meal, you're providing maybe an appetizer, or you're just piquing interest. And I think there's a certain insecurity that comes with that, like not knowing, like, you know, like, or no, not even insecurity, but how do I know what role am I supposed to play, and how do you take your ego out of it? In turn, like we all want to be like, oh, I brought this person to Jesus, but maybe this is not your time. Maybe you're just providing a teaser or an appetizer to something.
I think it was Paul who said, you know, I sowed the seed, Apollos
Yes.
watered the seed, and
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
so I think we need to realize that it's not about me.
No.
Missionaries experience that all the time.
It's, yeah.
One goes and plants, and 3 missionaries later will reap from it.
Yes. Yeah. It's not about me. I got to come back here and then follow the order.
Yeah, back to Canadian context and about religion and spirituality. There is actually a difference between American setting and Canadian setting. American setting now has become more inclusive when it comes to spiritual care, and spiritual care is more well-defined. When I came to Park Manor, previously, and not only Park Manor actually, but also other faith-based institutions. For example, we are promoting spiritual care that's beyond religious thing. But even our assessment itself, you know, there are still standards that are being used, like the hope, that old hope standard, which really is just exclusive to religious affiliation. So I said, we need to make our own spiritual assessment form that is not limited to religious affiliation, and in fact that religious affiliation is limited to Christian affiliation. Instead, we design our own spiritual care assessment that goes beyond religious affiliation to spiritual identity to include even secular and others.
Let me react to what you're saying. I think I said something in my verbatim, and I think you guys need to keep this in mind. Religious care, or religious affiliation, and religious care and spiritual care need not be
Yeah.
necessarily exclusive.
Yeah, yeah.
At best, religious care is also spiritual care.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I want you to think about it this way. If we have learned anything in the last couple of days, I hope you have learned anything. But if we have learned anything in the last couple of days, your goal is to provide spiritual care that's adapted to the religious need of the person that is in front of you.
Well said, well said.
Yeah.
Your goal is to provide spiritual care that's adapted to the religious need of the person that's sitting in front of you.
Yeah.
So you need to know what is their religious need, the religious identity.
Yeah, let me finish, I'm halfway through. And so what we did is that to go beyond that. There is still that religious thing, what they belong to. And so, for example, what I'm doing now in Park Manor is that we were blessed with a lot of volunteers. So when they are Catholics, because a lot of people are Catholics, we always refer them to the Catholics. And for their spiritual needs, we always ask, their clergies to minister to them. And now my role as a spiritual care is not to duplicate what has been done. We maintain that religiosity that they have, but for example, for people who are secular, for example, there are people there who are secular and Jehovah's Witnesses who do not have that religious care that they have because probably they're, first the secular don't have their own minister, so I minister to them in a different way. So, but my comment is this, that even in the context here in the region, you think about spiritual care, but still it's still limited to religious care. That's still, we don't want, of course, to do away with religiosity because that's the foundation of them. But again, over beyond that, it's still something doctrinal. So what do you really mean to meet the spiritual needs of the residents? It's always about, say, if I'm Catholic, it's just about giving to them the bread and the wine and the ritual. What about, their spirituality, if they're struggling, if they will be facing death or not? Something like the maid thing. So that goes beyond that one. So that's where we need to go beyond religiosity into spiritual care without actually, we don't intend to do away with religiosity, because it's the core of faith-based institutions in Canada. It's the core. So there should be more beyond that, and even our role, I'm just not talking about as a chaplain, but also how do we translate this into the pastoral ministry?
Okay, before I give you the word, let me come back here. Let's use an example. You have a patient that is in Park Manor, that is a Catholic patient. In the mind of the Catholic, there is a need for communion. There is a need for the sacrament of the sick.
Yeah, we do.
Right?
Yeah. The last rite.
It's not called the last rites anymore. It's called the sacrament of the sick. Officially in the church. Officially in the church.
Yeah.
The sacrament of the sick. And the sacrament of the sick can only be performed by a priest. And are you a priest? I don't have priests here, right? Okay. I just checking. So, when your patient in Park Manor is about to die, he or she has a religious need.
Yeah.
The religious need is, I need the priest to come here and put some oil on my forehead in the form of a cross, and do the persignation thing, and maybe pray 3 or 4 Hail Marys or whatever the case, read something from the Bible, and I need that, because if that doesn't happen, I will not enter into heaven when I die.
Yeah.
All right? So that is a religious need.
Yeah.
Are you with me?
Yeah.
Now, what are the spiritual needs associated with that? And the most important thing, who is responsible to provide for those needs? Because the responsible to provide for the religious need is who? Because he's the only one who can do it.
Yeah.
But the priest comes in here, he puts on the stole, puts the oil, does everything, blah, 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 blah. He doesn't even talk to the family. He just comes here because he has to perform that ritual. Right? Is there ministry in that? There is a ritual.
Yeah, ritual, yeah.
But who provides ministry?
Yeah, that's the thing.
Chaplain.
When the priest leaves, who stays there with the family and with the patient?
Chaplain.
Who holds the hand of that patient that is afraid because he or she is going to die? So you are providing spiritual care, whereas the other person provided the religious care.
Agree.
Okay? So there is space for both, and the patient needs both. The patient needs
In
both.
fact, one of our residents there, no, two of our residents are Jehovah's Witnesses. So what I do is actually nobody takes care of me, of her.
Uh-huh.
So I bring to her the news about Watchtower.
Yeah. You bring the watchtower to them.
And away, you know.
You know what? It was very interesting because the Jehovah's Witnesses would come to my hospital on a regular basis and fill all the lobbies with watchtowers. So I would go right after them, picking them up and taking them to my office.
They have the need.
And then whenever there was a Jehovah's Witness patient, I brought them the watchtower.
You know, one of our residents there is secular. He said I have nothing to do with religion.
Okay.
And he likes fado music.
Okay.
Yeah, I brought to him.
So you sit
fado
down
music.
and play some fado music or whatever it is that's important for them, and you sit down with them. Or one of the things I love the most is this cartoon that appeared in the Journal of Spiritual Care, and it wasn't during the month of the World Cup that appeared, and there is a patient that is saying, "Chaplain, I just realized that my room is the only one that has ESPN. That's why you're here all the time." Chaplain sitting down with the patient and just enjoying time watching ESPN.
Yeah.
Ministry into the spirit.
Ministry, yes, now.
Yeah. That's this hospital setting we're discussing, but I'm just having a need this time. I'm just sharing how to handle those people who doesn't want to be defiled even by condoning or allowing those things to happen. Adventist.
Okay, I'm going to ask you two questions. I don't need you to answer them. Number one, why do you want to go hug a porcupine? Why do you want to go hug a porcupine?
That's a good question. It's a good one.
That's the first question. And number two, why do you sweat somebody else's shirt?
That's good.
Because who is the person that is showing signs of not being understanding? Who is acting in a way that is unbecoming a Christian?
That's good. I don't want to hug the porcupine.
What happens when you go hugging porcupines?
What's that story you told us about that?
You get damaged.
Who is the one who suffers the most? Why?
Because you went somewhere you shouldn't have gone.
Exactly. So when you have problems like that, when I have problems like that, I ask myself a question. Is this a mountain I want to die on?
That's a good question.
That story you told about when those guys trying to change the rules under your leadership.
I like that. Thank you.
So I have learned something interesting too.
Yeah.
I always allow the porcupines to come hug me. I don't hug them. I allow them to come hug me. You know why?
Embrace you.
Because the only soft spot in the skin of a porcupine is the front.
Okay.
So when they come hug me, I don't suffer. But when I hug them, that's when I suffer. That make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay.
That's the scribes and Pharisees saying to the disciples, why does your master eat with sinners and tax collectors?
Exactly. Once again, I'm going to go back to the statement I made. Why do we have to be so insecure about our identity?
That's a good one.
Why? And the problem with people like that is, if you do a little bit of digging, if you go and try to find the story behind the behavior, you will discover there's something in there. You will discover there's something in there. I started my first district right after I finished. My first district, I was associate pastor, got married, the conference took me seriously, so they gave me a district by myself. And so I go to that new district. Did I touch a nerve or something? Okay, so I am in my first district by myself. And one Sabbath morning, we come into the church, and the friends of things that belong to somebody else had come into the house. You know what I'm saying? Had come into the church, and they stole our sound system. And this was a pretty large church, about 300 members. So we needed sound system. I had a cousin of mine, distant cousin, who actually had a company providing sound systems for local activities. So I gave him a call, and that Sabbath morning, when we came at 9 o'clock for Sabbath school, we didn't have sound system at the church. By 10, we had a sound system donated by him for the church. And then he said, you go get the money from the insurance company and use it for something else. So we did that. Anyways, we got the sound system on Sabbath morning, and we were able to conduct worship and all that and things like that. So Sunday morning, I'm with the Pathfinders and the things that pastors normally do on Sunday morning. And so I finish my thing, and then I'm coming back to my house. And as I'm going back to my house, I look to my right in one of the streets, and it's the street where the church treasurer lives. And he's washing the front of his house with, he's just doing what people do on Sundays, I guess. So I just stopped. And I went in there to just talk to the church treasurer. And as soon as I step out of my car, and he's like, "Hey, pastor, hey, I was thinking about that piece of garbage that this guy gave us yesterday." What piece of garbage? Yeah, that piece of garbage sound system that is good for nothing. He just took an old thing, and I just happen to know for a fact that he actually took a brand new sound system that he had bought the week before, and he donated it to the church. But he was just going off about this guy who was no good, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm there. I'm 23 years old, 22, 23 years old at the time, and I'm just taking it there, man. I'm hearing what he's saying, and don't ever tell me God doesn't have a sense of humor. Because as he's going on in this rant, out of the corner of my eye, I see the cousin that is turning on that same corner. And he sees that the pastor and the church treasurer are talking in front of the house, so he stops. Rolls down the window, and he goes, "Hey guys, how are you doing?" And the treasurer of the church looks at him and says, before I could utter a word, he says, "Oh, hey, how are you?" His name is Freddie. "Hey, Freddie, how are you?" I was talking here to the pastor how thankful we are for that sound system.
Okay.
And you know what's the worst part of that? I did not say a word. I let him lie through his teeth. why do I tell this story? Because had that happened right after I did my first unit of CPE, I guarantee you, I would have otherwise allowed, propitiated a confrontation in there.
Her blood should be on you because
Yeah.
you're correcting her.
Yes, yes. All this to say, we get transformed, we grow,
Yeah.
we do things differently, here and there.
Yeah, just a question, Of course, there is still differences, between chaplains and pastoral ministry. So we have become more inclusive in chaplaincy, So how do you apply that in pastoral ministry? So most of those attend here are pastors, instead of chaplain.
I think, go ahead.
Say, for example, there are issues of, people who say different things in the church and causing trouble in the church. And so there is still the issue of heresy, the issue of discipline. So there is still the issue of church policy things. So how would you apply that kind of attitude, inclusive attitude, in the openness, from chaplaincy into the pastoral ministry?
I think I responded that question when my friend back there asked it. All the pastors that have come to me to learn about chaplaincy or to, and then go back to church ministry, they go back with the understanding that they need to switch back that thing that happened when we were in the seminary, or I don't know, that somebody kind of programmed us to be talking all the time. So they need to switch that back into listen twice as much as you speak, because God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for one reason: to listen twice as much as you speak. So when you learn that, absolutely everything else in your ministry changes. Because when you see people that are problematic like that, you realize there's a story behind the behavior. And rather than using your anger, because trust me, people like that make you angry. They make the back of your ears go red. That's what happens with me when I get angry. So rather than making use of your anger to break and finalize the relationship, you make use of your anger, you own it, and then you start trying to use it to build the relationship. How? Finding the reason for the behavior. That's it. I had a conversation with a lady once that started, she was making my life miserable. And we're having lunch someplace, and God would have it that she had to sit next to me. And so I said something to her, and she immediately pushed back from the table and called somebody else on the table to be witness of what was going to happen. And so the other person came, didn't even know what was going on. I just want you to be a witness of the conversation, blah, blah, blah. So she came, sat next, and I went, I wonder, why are you reacting that way? I'm just asking clarification questions. What about what I just asked make you angry? Well, I don't know where I'm standing with you. Okay. What do you mean you don't know where you're standing with me? Does it mean that you don't have the kind of relationship, you don't understand the kind of relationship that we have? What do you see the relationship to be? And then when I go like that, the other person that goes there, that is there as the witness, turns around and says, "You stupid, just listen to the guy," and moves away.
Okay.
I'm good.
You're good? All right, I think I'm good too. I am finishing 25 minutes early, right? Or 26 minutes.
He did have one question, though.
All right.
That he said. He's not listening, so I'm going to.
Throw it out.
Did she ever share her story on how she came to the Adventist church?
Who, the doctor? The judge?
The judge.
Actually, you know what? Yeah, there's an interesting story about that. Because when we found each other at the church that day, it was like, oh man, interesting. And how did you turn out to become an Adventist and all that? She said, listen, you don't believe, you may not believe this, but you had a part in this. Why? She goes, well, when you asked me that question, when you said, you must be gaining something, I realized after a while that I wasn't gaining as much as I thought I was. And then I remembered that it was at an Adventist hospital in Orlando, where I sat with a chaplain, and he must be Seventh-day Adventist. So I would like to know a little bit more about this. Came over to the church, got to know people, got to study the Bible, and now here I am.
Circle of Hope Network, doing life and being church together.